Hello and good morning. It is 6 a.m. Eastern Time. It is final exam day on the last day of class for us in data analytics and business modeling. So you know that I'm going to drop at least one video as one last tip, trick, or hint going into the final exam. And what I wanted to do is create a video just to follow up the PowerPivot intro video that shows you a little bit more of working in the PowerPivot model. Uh, uh, Making explicit and implicit DAX calculations, or measures as we would want to call them. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about KPIs, which is key performance indicators. So what I've got right now is a data model that has been used to create a PowerPivot table. And the data that's in this model is pledge information. So think the Butler Blue Fund going to raise money for your college institution or raise money for PBS, right? So we've got four different data sources that are leading into this data model. The sources are pledge dollars, and the pledge dollars are listed by transaction, transaction date, the operator volunteer that took it, and the amount that they've made. The volunteer information, these are the volunteer operators that have taken those pledge dollars, and those are their operator IDs, which would obviously be the common field between pledge and contacts, right? Which would mean, by the way, if you're creating that data model, that the contacts table would be a dimension table, okay? And the pledge table would be a fact table, okay? So we've got potential customer leads on people that may donate money to us as well. And we've got some reward information based on the amount of money that people have pledged towards or earned towards the pledge drive. So now I've already created a PowerPivot table based on the data model, and I've already created relationships, which you can see based on what we've talked about. So if I jump in and I look at my design and I look at my relationships, I've already got that one-to-many relationship with operator ID between the operator or the volunteers table and the transactions table. We've already got that one-to-many set up. Whereas the operator ID is the primary key of the volunteer info table, which is a dimension table, and the operator ID is the foreign key, right, which is a common field that also is a primary key of another table in the fact table of transactions. So I've already got that created. So what I want to show you is how to create some calculated measures. Okay, I want to show you how to create some calculated measures. And there's two ways to do this, and you can do it from inside PowerPivot, or you can do it from inside just regular Excel. And what I want to point out to you is when you're creating these DAX measures, and DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions, think of it like the language of PowerPivot, and you can use it in Power BI. You can create explicit measures and you can create implicit measures. And the easiest way to understand it is an explicit measure is a singular calculation that you can create down at the bottom here in this space, which looks like it's nothing. See, so down here, I can actually start writing functions, okay? Down in here, DAX expressions. I can also do it here. So if I add a column as an explicit column, it's going to very much tie that to the rest of this data, and it's going to recalculate every single data point every single time inside the data model, right? And this is the columnar database that's underneath PowerPivot. Okay, if I write the explicit, it's going to show up down here, but it's not going to show you every single calculation each down. No matter which way you do this, you can still use those calculations inside PowerPivot. So if I switch out of this, and I go back into Excel, over here, when I click on my PowerPivot window, it's going to show me, here's my field list, that measure is going to show up, okay? And I have the ability to create that measure as well from inside PowerPivot within Excel. See, so I've got measure here, and I've got KPI here, okay? So they're both going to do the same thing. So just to keep it simple, we'll start by creating a measure or a DAX measure inside Excel without going into the PowerPivot window. And we're going to show you what that does when you do that. And I'm going to do something really simple to get it started. So I'm going to go to measure, and we're going to create a new measure, right? Think of that like a new statistic, a new value, something that we're analyzing, okay? Now what we're going to do here, and actually we don't want it based on this. We're going to do it based on transactions. There we go. And we will call this rounded awards. So now here's what this is. Here's what we're going to do. Notice right now we've got currency for our total pledged dollars, and we've got that with 2 decimal points. As of right now, there's no data in here that's not on the even dollar. However, you could get someone that would say, well, I'll donate $50.25. Well, we're going to do donations based on rounded amounts. So just to make this nice and clean, we're going to create a measure based on a rounded value instead of the actual value. So we're going to use the round down function in order to do that. Okay. Now, the reason I picked that one is it's just something super simple. So here we go. We have round down. And what I wanted to show you is when I start writing this, it's not just the name of a cell anymore, right? It doesn't use A1 style referencing like B6 or C7, which is A1 style referencing. It's the default method that most people have learned in using Excel. When you start getting into data modeling, when you start working in PowerPivot, you start working in DAX, you use something called structured references. And there's several different kinds of structured references. You've got fully qualified structured references and unqualified structured references. So notice all I'm going to do is I'm going to select the sum of pledge amount, right? So pledge amount was the actual column in my PowerPivot table, and I'm going to add that up. And it does that inside square brackets, okay? So I'm going to say here with 0 decimal points, and we're going to close this off. We're going to go into currency, and we're going to take these 2 decimal points away. Now this is mildly tricky here, because it's actually me taking these 2 decimal points away will make the 2 zeros disappear from currency here, but me using this round down function is actually going to round those functions to 0. Okay, so it's really a 2-part thing. So the round down function is going to round them to 0. So if it was 1375, it would become 0, 0. Okay. But it also, if you take these decimal points away, it's going to show them so they're not, it'll set them so they don't show. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It evaluates the formula, and voila, we've got that. Okay, so that's the first step. So now when I go over and I look at my transactions, I've now got this calculated measure called rounded award that I can turn on and I can turn off, just like a regular set of data. So before we continue, let's look at PowerPivot. So now that we've gone in PowerPivot, you'll see over here that this has created that explicit calculation. So down at the bottom, okay, in this space, it's taken the DAX that I've written inside Excel and it's translated that into the PowerPivot model, okay, and it's giving me that calculation. I can use that whenever I want. Now the difference would be with an explicit versus implicit, I'd have to go up here and I would do it each time and calculate that, which would obviously repeat all this data over and over again. Now, a better example of when you might want to do something with an implicit versus an explicit, you could do something like, if this was sales, you could add tax per transaction. And if I do that, it's going to calculate the tax at each individual data point, going all the way down this column, versus aggregating this entire thing in the explicit versus the implicit, okay? There's also a lot of people that do there's also a lot of talk about data management and how much calculation power and all that stuff it uses we can get out of this, okay? So first step was we've created this measure, right? So this itself is really a KPI, an indicator of some sort. But we're going to go ahead and turn it off because we don't need to see these values twice, okay? Or we could go the other way. We could turn it on and turn that off, okay? Both work. So the next thing I want to show you is how to create a KPI. And a KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. And the tricky thing with KPIs when you're working in PowerPivot is you can't have a KPI if you don't have a measure first. KPIs are basically created on measures. So they use a measure and they visually indicate how you did. So think of a KPI in a PowerPivot table similar to a conditional format that you would create with a rule in just regular old Excel. So notice when I open up KPI, it asks me, well, what measure do you want to use? What value are we basing it on? Well, there's our rounded awards that we just created. So let's say that we set a benchmark of $10,000. If you raise $10,000, that's your goal, right? I'm sure you've all seen it. It looks like a little column chart where it's just going up and up and up till we reach our goal. So let's say our goal is $10,000, just absolute value 10K, okay? So now what we can do is we can set what we consider to be good, average, and bad performance-wise based on that $10,000 goal. So let's say that if anybody is made 8,500, well, let's just go higher. Let's go 9,000 in, yeah, let's go with 9,000. Anyone that's made 9,000, okay, or has earned 9,000 in sales, or not sales, in donations, is going to be labeled as green. So they're doing really good. And we're going to drop this way down, and we're going to say anybody that's less than, 2,500 is going to be considered bad. Okay, so basically you're not raising as much money as we'd hoped, and everybody else in the middle is going to be yellow. So what that's going to do is it's going to put these little stoplights up, these green, yellow, red stoplights. That's going to then indicate visually how you're doing based on the measure, and that's your KPI. Now I know that 2,500 is probably pretty realistic for doing poorly, but I see that there's nothing that's quite that low in our data. So I'm going to bump this up to 5,000 just so you can see what a red one would look like. So I'm going to take this all the way up to 5,000, even though 5,000 is pretty good. And you have several different things we could do. So, I mean, we have multiple visualizations we could create based on this. For now, we'll keep it simple. So we're going to click OK. And notice when I do it, it doesn't show me what we think we're going to see right away. Okay. In the transactions table, inside your pivot table fields, you see it. There's the KPI for rounded award. But when I click the drop down, it doesn't look right. Right? It just says 0, 0, 1, minus 1, 0. Okay? Well, not a problem. If we turn that off, oops, we're going to go ahead and leave our rounded award on, and we turn our status back on, voila, there you have it, right? So most people are doing pretty good. We got one person that's over 9,000. We got one person that's under 4,000, and then we've got the rest. Okay? So there you go. KPIs in PowerPivot. Quick review. What did we do? We very quickly created an explicit measure using the round down function in DAX with PowerPivot. We then assigned that to a PowerPivot table. Now, when we did that, the data model had already been created in a previous step. Please see the video before this. We then used that rounded award measure and created a KPI based on that and applied that visual KPI to the PowerPivot table. With that, my friends, I will bid you adieu. I will see most of you, if you're in class, in about an hour and 45 minutes. And if you just stop by the YouTube channel to check it out at 6 a.m., you guys are awesome. Be sure to click subscribe. If I drop another video, you will get that notification as well. And we will talk to you soon.